Does your daily step count matter? That's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about research that answers that question. And also, why some people respond faster and some people respond slower, and how it all ties together. And what you're about to hear today and what you're about to learn will extend your life. In fact, there's a study, this was in 2015, and it was in the Scandinavian Journal of Medicine and Science in Sports, and it was entitled Exercise as Medicine, Evidence for Prescribing Exercise as Therapy in 26 Different Chronic Diseases. And so here's a quote from that study. They looked at a variety of studies. So this was a meta-analysis, and when they looked at it, they said, hey, there's research and evidence saying that exercise is beneficial as a treatment for these 26 different diseases. Psychiatric diseases, including depression, anxiety, stress, schizophrenia, neurological diseases, dementia, Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, metabolic diseases like obesity, hyperlipidemia, metabolic syndrome, polycystic ovarian syndrome, type 2 diabetes, type 1 diabetes, cardiovascular diseases, which is the number one killer, hypertension, coronary heart disease, heart failure, cerebral apoplexy, claudication intermittent, and pulmonary diseases, chronic obstructive pulmonary diseases like asthma, cystic fibrosis, and of course, musculoskeletal disorders like osteoarthritis, osteoporosis, osteopenia would fit in there, back pain, rheumatoid arthritis, and cancer. So we all need to move. Movement is medicine. That's not an opinion, that's a fact. The body is made to move. With that said, if you don't use it, you lose it. We've all heard these things. But there's more. One thing that you may have noticed in your programs, I'll put, hey, here's your training program, here's how you eat, and hey, 8,000 steps a day minimum. Why is that? Now, some people don't even look at it. Some people have never even seen it because they don't look at everything. Well, now you know. And after today, you will understand why it is so important. But the reason why I started adding this over the last several years was simple. I'm always looking at how we can improve and how I can best serve my clients and how we can optimize health, have more energy, more vitality, so we can create life as we wish it to be, so we can serve at the highest level and create massive value in the world. Just, if you're here, listen to this, you're the same. We already know it. Peas in the same pod, so to speak. So what I noticed was clients following the program, and they're following the same principles, because when you're a human, there's certain things that apply to everybody, like the amount of volume, the intensity. Are you challenging your body? So there are some things that maybe they're not following the nutrition or something like that, and that'd make a huge impact. But people tell the truth. And when they do, I'm not going to assume that they're not listening and they're lying to me. I'm going to assume the best of them. And what I found over the years was that some people responded rapidly, and other people would work their asses off in the gym, but they wouldn't see the same type of results. They would make progress, but it seemed so extreme. And then when you look deeper beyond it, I have records of my clients for decades now. And when I looked at the people that really struggled compared to the people that didn't, we looked beyond the training session. Not just nutrition, but we looked at sleep too. And sleep does matter. People who do not sleep regular tend to have higher hormone levels that make them eat more. I wouldn't say make them eat more, it's their choices, their lifestyle that created it, so it's not like a thing you can't control. But sleep does matter. But daily activity, so there's something called NEAT, N-E-A-T, and it stands for non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So the simple answer to that is the unplanned exercise. So your daily activity, the stuff you do that's not structured. Got it? And so that's the daily step count. And a large percent of the calories we burn throughout the day can come from that if we just utilize it. Like standing burns more calories than sitting. Walking burns more calories than standing, right? Simple things. Now, we don't need to do tons and tons of cardio because that gets hard on the body. It affects our ability to heal from training too and deal with stress. You can do too much of a good thing. So this study that I'm going to share with you today answered this question of, does daily step count matter? And what's the difference between people that are active throughout the day, that are walking and just getting a step count of 3 or more miles per day? Oh, by the way, 2,250 steps for most people is 1 mile. And so at 8,000, you're over 3 miles. That's like 5 kilometers. And that seems to be a tipping point where there's benefits. And if you go below that, then there are consequences. So what did this study say? Well, first off, the study was published in the Journal of Physiology, and it's titled Physical Inactivity Causes Exercise Resistance of Fat Metabolism. Now, I'm going to make this sound very simple because it is simple when you understand it. Now, one thing they did put in this paper, which I thought was fascinating and I didn't see before, but physical inactivity, just not moving, is the 4th leading cause of death in the world. So when we say movement is medicine, and I just shared that other meta-analysis, it really is. And most people don't use it, and it's free. So physical inactivity, just being sedentary, just not moving enough. I'm not even talking about training. I'm just saying just moving. It's associated with a myriad of different diseases and premature death. And in this paper, they looked at 2 possible contributing factors for this. And one is postprandial lipidemia. It's often abbreviated PPL, to keep it simple, which accelerates atherosclerosis. And this is another part of this, is it impairs your body's ability to utilize fats, to burn fat. And this would obviously contribute to obesity, inflammation in the body, which is causing a bunch of other imbalances, but could eventually become diseases. So what they found was people that say they trained, they did their workouts, they challenged their body, but then the rest of the day they didn't really move much. Maybe they had a desk job or something like that. And then the other people who were moderately active, so they at 8,000 or more steps per day, they didn't have any consequences. They were much more healthy, and they didn't suffer from this PPL and this increased atherosclerosis. So does step count matter? Yes, it does matter. And that's why it's important. It's not just about being lean or losing fat. If your body doesn't burn fat well, that is a serious issue. That's your health. It's not about just the way you look. It's not about the vanity of this. This is about living longer, living stronger, so you can be your best, feel your best, and give your best. So you can have a life of no regrets. And really, how does this impact the people that you love, that you serve, that you appreciate, that you care about? And so it's almost selfish, if you think about it, not to take care of your health, because at some point, rent is due. There are consequences for our actions and our inactions. That's called ecology, right? Study of consequences. So when I say 8,000 steps, it's important. It's important to move. It's important to understand that if you don't move, there are consequences. And how can you make this a reality? So there's a lot of ways of doing it, but becoming aware of why it's important is the first step. But tracking it, and there's a million ways to track it. So I wear a watch that tracks the things that I'm really interested in are my heart rate and my obvious step count. So those are things, and you can use an Apple Watch, you can use a pedometer, you can use a million different things. But the key is track it. It's an important metric. Now people are wearing all these devices and they have all this information, but a lot of that information, if you look at the research on it, is not really accurate. That doesn't mean it's not useful at some point, maybe eventually it will be, but we don't really use the information. So a lot of people are tracking stuff, but they're not using the data. So there are a handful of things that you measure that really matter. And one of them is your daily step count. And so how can we make this a reality? How can we make this part of your life? One, you got to measure it, and it's got to be important. And so no matter what is going on in your life, you can get your steps in. So I had a client that was on a flight for 12 hours the other day, and when they got to the airport, they knew they were going to be sitting a long time and probably sleeping a lot. And so they did a couple things. First, they didn't go to the gate and just sit there. They walked all over the airport. And they're like, well, what about my back? Well, you just pulled along. Now you got more resistance. Now it's more challenging. It's even better. And so they did that. So they're like, hey, I got to get a mile in as soon as I wake up. And so that was the goal. So I'm getting a mile in. And then every hour on the flight, when they were awake, they got up and walked up and down the aisle just a little bit. And then this person would also make sure that they drank water at that time too. So that was part of the routine. But they were aware of the day. They planned ahead, and they took action upon it. And then when they finished, they said, hey, I'm going to get these, when I land, we're going to walk around a little bit more. And so it's these little things. So you probably heard me say this a million times. It's the little things done consistently and relentlessly that lead to massive results over time. You know, the mindset of the dabbler is the shortcut. Like, hey, how can we do this faster? How can we do this faster? How can we do it faster? Well, there's a rhythm to life. There's an ebb and flow. So you can't force the body to change. And when you do, there are repercussions. Like when someone takes anabolic steroids, if they inject hormones in their body, which are derivatives of testosterone, what happens is your body won't let you just turn into a monster. It's going to convert that testosterone into either DHT or estrogen. And it can lead, even in men, to breast tissue formation. Women have a different effect. It's called virilization. They take on masculine characteristics because you can't force the body to do things without negative feedback. There's a rhythm of it. And so what's the answer? It is doing these little things. So by now, you know, if you've been listening to me for a while, you've been doing the program and the coaching for a while, that this isn't a body transformation program. That's a side effect of focusing on self-mastery. And the purpose of self-mastery is to live a life that you're proud of, that has a positive impact on the world. And maybe not on a grand scale, but on the people that you have interacted with. And you look back at your life and you have no regrets, but you have the energy to do that. Your body does not hinder you. It assists you. It propels you when you really take care of it. But you are not your body. You are the owner of a body, an able body, and if you're lucky, an able mind. Not everyone's blessed with these two things. And then we all have the opportunity of a lifetime, and that is the spark of life, the opportunity to be here and to be appreciated, because we are creators of our circumstance, and there are no shortcuts. So Bruce Lee said it best. His words emphasized and got to the essence of self-mastery. And he was being interviewed, and before mixed martial arts came along, Bruce Lee started mixed martial arts, because when I learned martial arts as a kid, my dad would take me to different teachers, and you could only learn one thing at a time. You'd have to learn Kung Fu, then you learn Jiu-Jitsu, you learn Taekwondo, you learn Muay Thai, but you couldn't mix them. It was, different masters would fight and challenge one another to say, my system is the best. You know, Jeet Kune Do, Bruce Lee's system, was a mixture of all these different things. It was like the first mixed martial art in a lot of ways. And he would be challenged a lot. And so during an interview, there was this other guy who wanted to challenge him. And he was being interviewed, and they said, Bruce, are you scared of this guy? He knows 10,000 different kicks. And Bruce Lee paused. He always had that cool presence to him, that centeredness, that poise. And he looks directly into the eyes of the interviewer, of the reporter, and says, I do not fear the man who has practiced 10,000 different kicks. I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times. Let that sink in. The Green Bay Packers won the first 2 Super Bowls in the National Football League, American Football League. And they only had like 3 plays. And the way they lined up before they snapped the ball, you knew what play was coming. But Vince Lombardi, their head coach, considered one of the best coaches of all time, who has incredible quotes, by the way, believed in mastery. He says, hey, we're going to run the ball right here. We're going to hand it off this guy, and we're going to run it right through you. Try to stop us. But they were so masterful, they were more conditioned. They were more skilled. They have practiced a handful of plays thousands upon thousands of times. They didn't have 1,000 plays in a giant playbook that they practiced a handful of times. So that's the answer, my friend. It's waking up in the morning, calling forth that part of you, your highest and best self, summoning that lion, lioness, and ask yourself, what am I here to create? What's my vision for this life? What's my next milestone? And what's my higher purpose for doing this? What's bigger than just the way I look? Because that's not enough. And in the end, it doesn't matter as much. And then how do you need to show up today to win this day? Not what you got to do next week or next year or when you're 105. What do you got to do today? Because the only thing that matters is now. Presence is always the point of power. Power means your ability to act, your ability to take action. And the present moment is the only time we can create. We look ahead to the future and create a portrait in our mind. We start to create a movie script in our mind with our thoughts, our focus, the stories we tell again and again and again. And that activates a part of our brain and nervous system that notices opportunities and patterns so we can take the next intelligent step, the next intelligent action. But when we get too caught up in the future, we start to become overwhelmed because there's too many opportunities, too many possibilities. You don't know what to do, and you start asking this question, what do I do, what do I do, what do I do? And then you become a human doing instead of a human being. And when we get caught in the past, like, oh, and we have regrets, like, I shouldn't have done that, I can't believe I did it, I can't believe I did that. And we don't forgive ourselves, we don't forgive others. It is having an anchor, and we're chained. But we've got to break the chains of the past by being in the present moment. How does this come back to your daily step count? How does it come back to your daily training? How does it come back to eating at about the same time each day and choosing foods closest to your natural source and choosing to drink beverages that are healthy for you, like herbal teas and water, or adding some lemon to it if you want to. Not necessary, but you can. Instead of choosing sodas or drinking alcohol, even if it's wine. Is wine good for you? Nope. And they're like, well, research says. Did you read the research? Every time I ever ask somebody that, they haven't. But when you actually read it, you realize that what really matters are these big rocks. What I mean by big rocks are the 80-20 principle. What are the handful of things that really move the needle, that really give you the result? They accumulate each day. Because the truth is, every day you get a little better or you get a little worse. Today is the only day that matters. But right now in the world, and I think it's always been this way from what I can tell, is that we're chasing the shortcuts. We're being distracted. We don't take command of our minds and bodies. We're not leading. We're reacting to the world around us. And until we decide what we want to create and why it's important to us and who we need to be each day and make that the most important thing, life doesn't happen for you until you do that. Life happens to you. No one wants to hear that, but it's truth. And we're not going to be perfect with it. There's going to be days where the day gets away from us. We didn't win the day, but we learned from it, so we didn't lose the day either. Because if we learn from it, we can use it to make sure we don't keep repeating the same mistakes. But Paulo Coelho, who was the author of the classic book, The Alchemist, has a quote. He says, a decision repeated more than once A mistake repeated more than once is a decision. So make it a rule that you refuse to keep making the same mistakes. I think that's a fair rule. And it's achievable. And it will help you and everyone you love, serve, and appreciate. So here's the plan. Let's start focusing. Let's make sure you're doing your North Star. Create. Everything that you create is first decided upon. You first create it in the theater of the mind. You do it in advance. So you look at the future and you paint the portrait in your mind. Not perfectly, but you start to give it shape. And then as you do this each day, it starts to get clearer. You start to observe things. You know what to do. You're being guided. You're being led. And then you act upon it. You train each day by calling forth. But what's the purpose of training? To call forth your highest and best self. What's the side effect? Well, when you add consistent and progressively challenging training with the fuel to rebuild and repair, and the time and the rest and sleep, your body gets a little better each day, a little stronger. You build a little bit more stamina. You strengthen and upgrade your cells. As cells break down, the old, less efficient cells break down. They're replaced with new, vibrant cells, radiant cells that make ATP with ease, that performs their jobs and functions with ease. And it shows up in how you feel. But we must take command. Must refuse the stories of limitation. The greatest enemy is the untrained mind. The trained mind is the greatest ally. It is the artist of life. So the daily step count. This started as some simple question. Does daily step count matter? Does movement matter? Does exercise matter? That's not structured. Well, you need structured training because there's a science of transformation. You need a certain amount of work. You need certain exercises to balance your structure and create alignment. You need to give the body the fuel. You need to hydrate. Just slight dehydration creates muscle tension and brain fog. At 2% decrease in hydration status, it impairs your ability to do math. It's pretty important, especially if you're an accountant. And so it comes down to these little things each day. And I know it's not sexy, but this is about self-mastery. Mastery of the 3 pillars of creation: your thoughts, your emotions, and your actions. So when you wake up each day, the goal is to be the higher self, because you are enough. You have everything you need. You don't need to keep chasing things. You have it now. Decide what you want to create. Decide to honor your body each day. Honor your mind by utilizing it properly, not letting social media and other things and people, the environment, to steal your attention. Your attention is your spiritual currency. What you focus on expands, it grows, it strengthens. Every time, think of it this way: if every time someone stole your attention, you allowed someone to steal your attention, or allowed social media to steal your attention, or a television set, whatever it is, if you had to pay $100, how long would that last? How long would you let someone steal your attention? So every minute someone steals it, you got to give $100 right then and there. How much money would you be paying out each day? And how long would it last if you knew the consequence of it right now? The thing is, we don't know the consequence of this till much later. When you look back, you're like, man, I wasted so much time. I wasted so much of my life. And I'm not saying any of you, I'm not saying it's about anybody. I'm just saying, as humans in life, this is a challenge. So getting that daily step count, measuring that, knowing the handful of things that move the needle, and doing it to the point where you're present and you're in a state of being that is love-based. If you are training and you're like, oh, I hate this shit, this is the worst, how much more? Oh God, this is never gonna even work. I don't know why I'm doing this. You're programming that. Eventually you're not gonna do it, let's be honest. You're programming yourself to fail. And that is the most common thing in the world. But what if you're training and you're like, man, I am so grateful to have a body that moves, have a body, just to have a body, to have my arms and legs. I have a client with no arms and legs, actually. He's incredible. There's nothing he can't do. I'll share that with you guys another time. But just to have that state, what if when you trained, you appreciate your body, you're like, hey, what does this body need today? I need to challenge it. I know that. I need to stimulate it, not annihilate it, though. And I need to be consistent. I need to give it a daily dose. And I'm going to move throughout the day because movement is medicine. In fact, your intervertebral disc in between each of your vertebrae, you have 33 vertebrae, and those discs are avascular. They have no blood supply. So how do they get nutrition? Through active diffusion, through movement. And so one of the leading back experts in the world to heal back pain, Dr. Stuart McGill, he recommends walking as part of the healing process and the prehabilitation to prevent back pain. So your daily step count even matters for that. So the purpose of this CoachCast was to remind you of what you already know, what really matters, and to reclaim your attention, your focus, and to be present, and to remind you that you are the creator of your circumstance. That no matter what you want to create, if you get it clear enough in your mind, you have a clear vision, you know the next milestone, you have a higher purpose beyond the actual just achievement. It affects more than just you. And you know who you need to be. You need to know your identity of what type of person you need to become in order to create this vision and purpose. And if you can do it with your body, and you absolutely can, it will channel into every other area of your life, in your relationships, in your finances, in your businesses, and just learning new things, and just your ability to create, your ability to serve. But it all comes down to this, self-mastery. Doing a handful of things over and over again in a state of being that is love-based in nature. Because love is creative energy. Fear is not even a thing. Fear is a lack of a thing. It is a lack of love-based energy. It's a lack of love. Love is a constructive, a productive, a creative energy. It gives more energy than it takes. Where fear, the lack of that, uses more energy than it takes. And that is why when people are exhausted, they're going to be sad, angry, irritated, annoyed, depressed, whatever it is a fear-based emotional state. No one has ever been, oh, I'm so grateful, I'm so joyful, I'm so courageous, and I'm exhausted. No one's ever said that. Because that is not part of the laws of nature. So, my friends, just remember, you are greater than any challenge, any obstacle that stands before you. And the only limits are the ones we place upon ourselves. You were born a lion, not a lamb. You tap into the real you, but you have to retrain yourself. The way you retrain yourself is you wake your ass up in the morning and you say, I am here for a reason and a purpose. And it's bigger than my moods. It's bigger than the difficulties of the day. I am here to live like a lion, not the fear of a lamb.